afternoon readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly Shell.
And Ros from Scully Darling About the Books.
And it's Jane Austen July, so that means that we celebrate with much delight, and I crawl out of my hole and sometimes share a video or two. And the plan this time is very relaxed. All we're going to do is we're going to drink some tea
And ramble about Emma.
have a little chat about Emma, because Emma's the group read this year, and we've both been really enjoying
We've both reread it,
Yes.
as you should when it's a group read. And we both really enjoyed rereading it, as we always do, but also we've really enjoyed the group read group on Discord.
Yeah, and the discussions that have come out there and elements of the novel that have maybe come to the fore a little bit in that discussion that maybe were less, what things we thought about less before.
Yes, and just it's just such fun hearing other people's reactions to a book that you know really well and love very much.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to restrain yourself from thinking, how could you think that? And then other times you're thinking, gosh, yes, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And that's quite enjoyable.
And the thing is, like, these books are like old friends to us,
Yes.
and to a lot of the people on the Discord as well. They're books that for many of us we've aged with.
Yes.
You know, we've read them time and again over the course of our lives.
Yeah.
We've come to them from different points, different angles, different emotions, and different levels of study and enjoyment. And all of the different opinions have some validity,
yes.
apart from when people say things that are textually incorrect. Can I say that? when people say that you do, but you know, like, every opinion is valid. But no, that's just me with my pedant hat on thinking. But in chapter this, they said that. Yeah.
But the yes, you're right. That one of the reasons that Austen is read is because she's open to different interpretation, different, like, very personal reactions, and you know, every book you read is like a dialogue between the reader and the author, and that's a particularly fruitful dialogue when it's an Austen novel, and so it's like nobody's views are wrong. It's always interesting though, but about how people sort of justify them or don't.
Yeah.
One of the things that I felt rereading Emma this time with a wider group than I not, previously, is that I think Emma is a particularly English novel.
Yeah.
Something about the setting and that it's very much the English village.
Yes. And that was something that I was going to say. We get so much more of village life in this book than we get in any of the other books.
Yeah.
I mean, in Pride and Prejudice, we get some interaction with Meryton, and we get people like the Phillipses and the Longs, and in Persuasion we get the kind of the little area around where the Hayters and the Musgroves live, but this book is really embedded in how villages work, and we get magistrates, and we get the clergy, we even get a little bit of a reference to sort of poverty.
We get shopkeepers, we get labourers, we get yeomen, yes,
farmers.
So more of a cross section of society than often in Austen's books, but also I think that can mean, if you're coming to it sort of not steeped in how did 18th, 19th century English society work, how did class work, what were the relationships what were the fine grading. Class is really important in Emma.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've noticed even more this time.
Yes, particularly
how staged and how detailed the class is. Yeah,
yes.
Particularly with the way that people have responded to certain aspects.
Well, yes, and watching other people sort of observe that and wonder about it has sort of brought it to the fore for me, as opposed to just being sort of taking it as read.
Yeah, and I think there are some class distinctions that I maybe took for granted, that this has made me think more closely about actually which side does that sort of lie on.
Yes, why is Emma of a different class to Mrs. Elton, for example?
Yeah.
And I think if you're sort of, if you're not, it would be easy not to recognise that, those sort of distinctions, Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about for instance, why Emma is a different class to Mrs. Austen?
Right. Well, and like English class is really interesting, isn't it? Because there always has been a lot of mobility.
Yes.
Yeah. The idea that it's totally fixed, absolutely no, not true.
And there is so much mobility within Emma. Like almost every family is either on their way up or on the way down, or moving around or trying to get themselves into a different place.
Absolutely. But the sort of epitome of the sort of like gentry and aristocracy, and we're only dealing with sort of gentry here. They're sort of county families, but they're not noble or aristocratic families.
Not titled.
Not titled, yeah. But there it is about links to a place and having been established somewhere for a long time. That sort of family history. That's it. And so if you're the Coles, say, you're now economically on a par with.
And they can afford
the
a piano, as they so proud to bring it out.
But they're not yet. They haven't fully arrived because their money is new. But in 2 generations' time, that distinction will have gone. People aren't going to say, oh, but his great-grandfather's in trade, because everyone probably has a great-grandfather in trade as well.
Yeah.
So
and being involved in trade to some extent was quite normal.
Oh yeah.
So your characters who were part of sort of the landed gentry would also have often had business involvements in business concerns.
Yes. And younger sons always had to find something to do, and that might be the church, and it might be the army or the navy, but it could also be, certain professions and other professions and including like Austen. If you look at Austen's family, her brothers, one became a banker, for example.
Yes, though I suppose. So Mr. Knightley's younger brother John is a lawyer.
Yes. And
I don't imagine that a Knightley brother would have become a trader.
No, because absolutely.
Yes, but Mr. Weston, for instance, his family have been rising in gentility and prosperity for a couple of generations.
Yeah.
But they've got property, they've inherited stuff, they've lived in the county for a long time, they're viewed as
one of the county families.
One of the county families, but his backup is to go to trade. So they're not quite as established, they're not quite as wealthy as the Knightleys, for instance.
Yeah.
And I did wonder, early on, Emma talks about what she does to promote the marriage of the Westons.
Yes.
And she says, I smoothed many little matters.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder whether her smoothing little matters was to do with whether or not Mr. Weston was kind of viewed as an acceptable member of the Hartfield kind of set.
Yes.
Because he was actively involved in trade at that time.
Indeed, but then the other thing about Mr. Weston is he's
brilliant, he's great, people like him.
He's just such fun, and he's sort of rather bumptious and energetic, but he's so sociable, and he pulls things together. When they're on sort of Box Hill, they were missing him pulling things together, for example. Yeah. So he has a role in the village that wins him.
Yes, although he is at Box Hill. He tries to bring things together.
Yes, exactly. They missed that because it wasn't a party he'd organised. If he'd organised it, but instead it fell into 2 halves, and it was so he oils the wheels of social life in the village, and that's welcomed.
And Mr. Weston in a way parallels Miss Bates.
Yes.
Because Mr. Weston's on the up, everything's going right for him. He's now at a position where he's bought Randall, so he had a property in Highbury, but he's now got a better property, and he's got his wife and everything.
And his wife, although she was a governess, she's definitely she's of that she's a gentlewoman, as it were.
And Miss Bates is at the moment on an equivalent social level, but she's potentially on the way down in that they don't have a significant income. They have a servant, but they're living in like smaller lodgings in the centre of town. They used to be living at the vicarage where Mr. Elton now lives. But yeah, their position is gradually deteriorating. But both of them have this really important social role, and both of them are loved by the entire town because they are really nice, caring, happy, sociable people. So it's interesting that it shows like how your character can also affect whether doors are open to you or not.
But on the other hand, if you want to get away with being a bit difficult and even at times obnoxious, it helps to be, you know, a Knightley or a Woodhouse.
Or a Mr. Woodhouse.
But everybody loves him too. But
and it very clearly says, you know, like due to his history and his habits, you know, everyone does love him, and he can, you know, like dictate who he has to make up a card party in the evening
and stop people from having the nice food that Emma's arranged for them to.
Although it does say Emma does help everyone to food, even when he's here saying, let's have a nice little base of gruel.
Yes, so class has been one of the interesting themes of this reading for me. And another sort of thing that I suppose came particularly strongly through for me in this reading is about whether having parents or not having parents, or having mothers and not having mothers. And I think that was something that you were thinking about as well. Yeah,
the number of characters in this story who were unmothered, should we say? So we'll probably think the most about Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax, because they were the ones that were sent away from Highbury and they come back. Emma herself obviously lost her mother when she was just old enough to remember her, but not significantly.
So that's three lost mothers for a start.
Harriet Smith, we don't know anything about her mother. Everyone worries about who her father is, who obviously has given no parental contact, but we don't find out anything at all about who her mother was.
So all she has is Mrs. Goddard, who's obviously a very nice person and runs a good school, but it's not the same.
So when we look at Harriet as a character who then is so easily led by Emma, would you say? Or so ready to like soak up Emma's affection and see, being able to come and visit Emma at Hartfield is more important to me than saying yes to Robert Martin, who I actually do quite like. You know, like when she's making those decisions, you've got to think of her as somebody who's never had that kind of significant interest in her as a person.
But the one that you pointed out to me, which I had never thought of before, was Miss Taylor. Miss Taylor becoming Mrs. Weston.
So Miss Taylor has been a governess with the Woodhouses since Emma was 5 years old, and she's still young enough to get married and have a child at the end. So we think probably she's in her early 30s.
So she was maybe 18
when she came to the Woodhouse family
to be a young governess.
We hear no reference to her having any family. Obviously, when Emma's old enough to not need instruction anymore, she doesn't leave and go anywhere else. We never see her going to visit anybody. I think we have to assume that by the age that she went out as a governess, she had no significant family around her.
Which was presumably why she...
in the same position as Jane Fairfax. That she had...
Churchill.
Jane Fairfax?
Fairfax, Jane Fairfax. Yes, sorry.
She would be Jane Churchill at the end.
Yes, very, very. So yes, in a very similar position, and that makes, in a way, when Mr. Woodhouse is so like his enormous affection for Miss Taylor and his feeling that like her going to marry Mr. Weston is as if she's left home, and you're thinking, but she was a governess, you know, she was employed, but actually, if she's been there since she was 18,
almost a child herself.
So she has kind of grown up at Hartfield.
And despite Mr. Woodhouse being a valetudinarian all his life, you have to assume that when Jane Fairfax came at the age of 18, like he's a very like he in a sense has been there for her growing up and her coming into maturity. Like she's not his
Miss
daughter.
Taylor.
Yes.
Yeah. You said Jane Fairfax when she came. It doesn't matter. But we knew what you meant. Yes.
Yeah. In a way, he has been a parental figure to her.
Yes. I think so. And kind of thinks of himself the way he talks about Miss Taylor.
Yeah.
It's
she's like an extra daughter to him.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So and then I guess that this lack of parental guidance is kind of why we get the chaos that we get. Yes. And then Miss Taylor, who becomes Mrs. Weston, then is the surrogate mother to Emma, but she's also the kind of like the balancing force. She kind of eases some social situations, and she's the one that's missing at Box Hill. And I think, this is why I was like questioning you saying about Mr. Weston, but I think it's the fact that she's missing that's really crucial. Because if she'd been there, can you imagine Emma and Frank Churchill behaving the way that they did?
No. And yes.
Because she's the chaperone. She's the one that's really qualified to be a chaperone. And Mrs. Elton claims to be a chaperone because she's married and it's her, but she doesn't really have the skills for it.
Yeah, and she would have spotted what was happening, and because she's quite proprietorial about Frank Churchill, because he's now her stepson, like I think she would have moderated both of them because they were running away with each other with sort of degree of flirtation and cruel wit, and people always focus on how badly Emma behaves at that point, with her, the very cruel tease of Miss Bates, but Frank Churchill is
infinitely worse.
Is being absolutely devilish towards Jane Fairfax in that scene.
When you've read the whole book and you know what the story is, and you read that scene again, which we've both done multiple times now, it's almost unfathomable how they still end up married at the end.
Yeah, but he says, because he talks about the Eltons getting married after a short acquaintance in a public place, which is what happened to Jane Fairfax, and
asks Emma to make him a wife that will suit him, suit him and educate her and things.
He's literally taunting Jane, and you wonder why she didn't just break it, but of course she's in love, and he was doing it because he was
yes.
She's a deceitful tone. No,
because he apparently felt that she didn't love him, you do wonder about the long-term happiness of that relationship, whether being Mistress of Enscombe is worth being Mrs. Churchill.
Well, yes, but the alternative is going to the small ridges, was it?
Yes.
Yes. Chosen by Mrs. Elton. I mean, oh my goodness, I don't know.
Yes, and actually that's another thing that I wanted to briefly mention, because it came up in the Discord chat a while ago. People talking about Jane Fairfax's comment about the governess trade. And the link of that in the conversation to slavery, where she says, the trade, I won't say in human flesh, but in human intellect. And Mrs. Elton says, is that a fling at the slave trade? I assure you, Mr. Suckling was always rather a friend of the abolition. And Jane Fairfax then comments about, I was just talking about governesses, but as the greater... the greater suffering, who's to say which side it's on? And obviously, from a modern perspective, and even potentially from some perspectives at the time, that sounds like a horrendous and unbelievable thing to say.
Yes.
But I have been reading Black England by Gretchen Gerzina, and I haven't got that far with it yet. I'm about... But I read the introduction is by... Zadie Smith, and she talks about some things that happen later on and references the fact that at the time Emma was written, the slave trade had been abolished in the British, broadly speaking, in much of the British Empire, but owning slaves had not been, and slaves who came to England were free if they knew to claim it.
If you set foot in England,
you're free, except a lot. But as long as people knew that. And Jane, having lived in London, would probably have met quite a lot, not met as into socially know, but would have come across many former slaves and black residents of London. There was quite a big black community in London, which I didn't know, which is fascinating about this. But at the time there was a massive misinformation campaign relating to how happy slaves were, basically. And there were people on the abolition side who were bringing forth ex-slaves publishing narratives, like Ulada Raquiano and Ignatius Sancho. But they were also very wealthy, very influential, what is sometimes referred to as the plantocracy, people who were in plantations, putting out loads of stuff saying, actually, slaves are
happy lives and well looked after and
I would
contented.
Say you can very much parallel it to, say, big oil corporations now talking about how green they are and how much good stuff they're doing for the environment. I think saying that accusing Jane Fairfax of being really bad for saying this probably misses some of the context of the time. And the fact that Jane Austen chooses to include that reference at all is quite interesting to me, because it shows that she is engaging with these topics to an extent.
And she's happy to get the mention of abolition.
Yeah, she's happy to fit that
into her novel.
And the fact that Mrs. Elton is, and we know which side you're supposed to be on, because it's Mrs. Elton that's on the side of slave owners, because she says, he's a friend to the abolition, but that doesn't mean to say he's not got any slaves on his plantations.
Yes, we take that to, I always read it as what she's saying is she knows perfectly well that he's his money.
He's a slave owner.
Yeah, he's a slave owner.
And the money that, the family, and the association of her with Bristol as well, which was
because she comes from Bristol, and that was one of the two biggest slave ports in Britain. Liverpool and Bristol were the sort of the biggest centres for that. So,
I can hear a baby crying. So
we might have to stop.
I reckon we'll wrap up there. But I think we've had an interesting discussion.
Yes.
Thank you very much for watching. I'll let you wrap up.
I will wrap up while she goes and rescues the baby. But I don't know how to wrap up a video of Tilly, so I'll just stop it. And hope you had a brilliant Jane Austen July 2. Hope that you've read the group read, Emma, or even if you haven't read it this time round, if you have any comments about what we've been talking about, we would love to read. And roll on next Jane Austen July, I say.